A Brighter Sun, Chapter 2. There was a change in the economic and social life and outlook of Trinidadians in 1941. United States personnel arrived, and the construction of bases provided work at high wages, higher than anyone had ever worked before. Clerks quit their desks and papers and headed for the bases. Farmers left the land untilled. Laborers deserted the oil and sugar industries in the south. There was a rush to where the money flowed. From neighboring islands, Grenada, St. Vincent, Barbados, natives kissed their wives and relatives goodbye and came to Trinidad to make their fortunes. The city was crammed as the Yankee dollar lured men away from their home and family. Politically, a new constitution came into force, increasing the number of elected members to the Legislative Council by 2 and reducing the strength of official representation from 9 to 3. At the end of March, the Stars and Stripes waved over Trinidad territory. Acquisition of lands for the bases left hundreds homeless and posed a problem. Soon after the arrival of American troops, fights began between civilians and servicemen. There was a new scale of increased taxation upon those best able to bear it. A man named Afu, Dede, was caught urinating behind a tree in a park and was jailed. An Indian man from Gasparillo, a southern village, went about the city eating bottles and sticking pins and needles in his body. The sum of $791,228 was voted for slum clearance. Imports were controlled, a committee appointed to settle displaced persons, another to assist the Rockefeller Institute of New York in conducting a malaria survey. A housing settlement was opened in the southern district of San Fernando. How Joe Martin ever came to leave the city of Port of Spain and settle down to a comparatively smooth-flowing life in Barataria with Rita was once history to some people in Trinidad. He himself used to muse on the matter over a bottle of rum, telling Rita, "But gal, life is a hell of a thingy. But look how I take out myself and leave sweet man life in town. Look how I leave the boys coasting and come up here to live with you in the bush. But life is a hell of a thingy." Rita, accustomed to his reminiscing, would sneer, "Why you don't go back then? Why the hell you don't go back to the barrack yard where you're born? I did always know you can't live a decent life." In the dry season, a stream dies just on the northeastern outskirts of Port of Spain in a district called St. Anne's. It just trickles to nothingness, and the bed is dry and rocky, even becoming covered with green shrubs at the farther end. But in the wet season, the stream gathers courage and ventures farther down. To convey this water to the sea, the dry river, a concrete canal about 20 feet deep with an average width of 30 feet, was built. When the rains come and the stream is swollen, the dry river becomes a swirling current, sweeping the oddest miscellany to the sea. But it is not useless in the dry season. Those who live on its banks find a variety of uses for it. Washers bleach their clothes on its bed. Rubbish is toppled over its sides in the night, and in the day, when nobody is looking, dead animals rot there unless the water rises to wash them down. Children play in the dry river, rolling bicycle wheels on barrel hoops or playing bat and ball. When water is flowing not high enough to be dangerous, they play boat race with bits of wood. People walking to the central part of the city use it as a road. Young men gather under the bridges where roads cross to gamble. Steel bands practice there as the players then consider themselves out of the way. By night, the dry river is a rendezvous for lovers. Swift consummations have happened on its hard bed in places where overhanging trees or houses hide the light of the moon. Because of the scarcity of public conveniences, some find it convenient to slip down and relieve themselves. The dry river has been known to cause and prevent bloodshed. It has been the frontier line for steel band fights. If you only cross the river, it's trouble here tonight. Men have chased their enemies to the border and hesitated to go across. By day, far more by night, people who consider themselves respectable think twice before being seen in the area. If they have friends there, they are uneasy about visiting. But girl, you mean all you can try and get a better place? This area too bad. They're always fighting there. Young men born east of the Dry River, on Rose Hill, or Calvary Hill, or Lavent Hill, grow up with the understanding that they are slum folk and dangerous people. George Street runs parallel with the Dry River. It is separated from it by the chain of dwelling and business houses which, viewed from the street, give the impression of being jammed so tightly together that if one was removed, the others would collapse through sheer pressure. Behind this, in the narrow alleys between the houses and the barrack yards, the people are so packed that Ma Jones knows what Ma Lambie is cooking for lunch just by poking her head through a crack in the dilapidated wall which separates their kitchens. And when she is going to have a bath, "Aye, but Lambie, I ain't see a bathe for a long time now." "Why you don't mind your own blasted business?" In the night, there is a smell of stale food and rubbish piled high near the pavements. Slinking, mangy dogs sniff and explore the debris for something to eat. Shrunken old people, wrapped in old newspapers and bags, crouch in doorways and on the cold concrete sidewalks. In George Street, most anything lies in the drains. Coconut shells, tattered clothing, broken bottles from an early battle, empty tin cans, dead dogs. Old women come out in the night and stand or sit on the steps. The way the houses are built, you could walk on the pavement and look through a window and see into the bedrooms and dining rooms. The women sit with their babies on their knees and talk to one another, laughing loudly at rude jokes, scratching their legs and backsides. The way they sit, one could see right up. "What the hell you looking at? Yeah, you never see it." Many of them cook food to sell. They make sauce, boiled pork seasoned with lime and pepper and cucumber, and black pudding. They rest their trays on a barrel or box outside a rum shop. When these places of vantage are already taken, for a brisk trade goes on with the rum drinkers who like to have pudding or sauce while drinking. They sit by the corners or on the pavement. They sell cheaply because only the poor people buy. On a Saturday night, especially, some middle and upper class families like their sauce and black pudding and delegate a member of the family to make the purchase as inconspicuously as possible. The vendors also sell bake, a kind of bread, and accra and float, a light bake with saltfish fried in oil. Daring young men sometimes gamble on the pavement in the night, having set a guard at the corner to whistle when a policeman is approaching. But mostly they just group about and chat with the prostitutes. Before the war, you could have got one for $1 or even 2 shillings. But since the Americans came, the girls sharpened themselves up and wouldn't be had for less than $5 Yankee. Young girls from the country districts augmented the ranks, and there was keen rivalry. But a lot of men had girls who did that sort of thing and brought back the money for them, and they lived without working. Joe Martin was born in George Street. Joe might easily have not been born. It was long before the war. Business was fairly prosperous in Trinidad. You could get a tin of condensed milk for 6 cents, sleep with a woman for $1, and go to a double feature at the cinema for $0.01. The girl who bore him had many boyfriends. "They go do that for she," the neighbors warned, but Ethel paid them no mind. At an early age, she found out that whoring was the easiest way to make a living. Her aunt, known to one and all as Ma Lambie, was one of those people who form part of a community. If you probed into her past, she became a mystery. but taken for granted, she was just an ugly, frowning negress with great bow legs. It seemed her legs bowed because the upper part of her body was just huge breasts, like buffers. She always wore a colored piece of cloth on her head, to stop them dew from falling on me. Ma Lambi, as she made Accra and float, told Ethel that if she went on like that, she would only turn out to be a whoreless whore. A worthless whore. But Ethel asked her what the hell she was before her breasts got flabby and her skin wrinkled. When Joe began, Ethel rushed to Ma Lambi to seek advice about an abortion. What she said was, "Oh God, Auntie, you gonna help me throw away this child?" Ma Lambi looked back on her own barren years and pondered the situation. She was getting old. A child ought to comfort her. She cursed Ethel roundly for 15 minutes, and when the girl was crying and bawling, "Oh God," and wringing her hands, she stopped abruptly and asked, "Who is the father?" Ethel's tears and moans ceased immediately, and she said hopelessly, "I don't even know for sure. I was with John Monday night, and I saw her Tuesday night, and then I was walking in Frederick Street looking at pretty things in the glass case." Joe Martin came. He lived under the bulky, grotesque shadow of Ma Lambi, and he never knew his mother, and they never knew his father. Ma Lambi used to beat Joe every day. She clouted him behind the head if a stick wasn't near, or gave him a jolt with her elbow as he hung onto her skirt while she was making sauce in the kitchen. As he grew up, the stick grew in proportion. She would say when she struck him and the stick bounced off his hardened skin, "Ah, you're getting man now. I have to get something else to beat you with now." By the time she was using a heavy piece of mangrove wood, what she used as fuel, Joe was 16 years old, but his mind was much older, and his body was tough with hard work and blows. The last time Ma Lambi beat Joe was a Saturday morning. He remembered it well, thinking back on his life when he was a man. The barrack yard was buzzing with female life. Men who had no work lounged about on the steps or on the trees, watching their women work. Some were playing cards, sitting in a circle under a mango tree, and a group of boys were intent on the production of a steel band instrument from a rubbish can they had stolen from the roadside the night before. The women were washing or cooking or sewing. The smell of the various ingredients which they put in black pudding was strong in the air. Little naked children screamed and jumped about, playing in the earth with stones, scraps of wood, bits of paper, anything they could lay their hands on. Those not old enough crawled and encountered the delight of a stump, a yellow leaf, or a broken bottle. Ma Lambi was calling Joe. Cognizant of the power in her voice, she was sure Joe was nowhere in the yard. Once he had been hiding under the mango tree, watching the older boys and men play whoppee, a gambling game with cards, and when she called he hadn't answered. But that only happened once. It could never happen again. Blows, blows, blows. After that beating, she was sure if Joe was crippled, he would drag his body a mile if she called. "Joe! Joe!" she screamed, and her voice and fierce demeanor struck terror in the little children, and they stopped playing and ran out of her path. "Joe! It's where that blasted boy gone at all." She came to the bank of the dry river. She looked under the bridge, and she saw him with 4 other boys. "Joe!" she screamed again, but rage choked her voice, and it didn't carry. She brandished the mangrove wood in the air like a warrior about to do battle. "Wait till I catch you! Oh God, you little black nigger!" The boys were gathered around a dog they had dragged out of the water. It must have been dead for days, lying in the drain until rain fell and the water washed it down to a bend in the canal where it had lodged fast against the breeze. The boys had challenged each other to pull it out, and Joe had poked a bamboo and pushed the bloated, rotting body on the bank. Now they stood across the carcass. "Look at he eye," Joe said. "It look like he dead long time, and fussy stink. It's a good thing if we could get it by the school and frighten them girls with it." No one saw Malambi as she crept up, her hands behind her back, so that the mangrove lay along her spine out of sight. She stood off a little way, and her face assumed a change. She swallowed 3 times before the rage went into her belly, and she worked her face until the tightness there went. She even parted her thick lips and tried to smile. "Joe, Dudu darling boy, I was calling you so long. You didn't hear your auntie?" Her voice was wheedling. The boys looked up. Joe stared at his grandmother with fear. Then, as if the tone of her voice had just registered, he opened his mouth in amazement. He sniffed the air suspiciously, like an animal. He was crouched on the ground, and the bigness of Malambi was like a force keeping him down. He wanted to get up, but she held him there with her eyes. She was speaking, still in that amazing manner. "Dudu, is cocoa that I just cook? I bring some for you, love. Come now. Look, I have it hide behind my back." The other boys tried to get behind her to see if she was speaking the truth, but Malambi backed away. "Don't go, Joe. She could beat you. She lie, Joe. She ain't have no cocoa." "Don't mind them, Dudu." She put honey in her voice. "You don't believe your old grandma?" "It's true, grandma. It's true," he faltered, playing for time. "Come and see sugar pie. Come, Dudu." Joe approached warily. His hands tensed and raced to ward off the blows. And when he was near enough, Malambi's rage came back from her belly to her throat, and her eyes gleamed. The mangrove stick descended on Joe's back with all the force of her 2 arms. She screamed, "Oh God, you nasty nigger! I go kill you with blows today! You ain't hear me calling you!" Joe fell to his knees, cringing and writhing like a snake, but he didn't cry. 3 times the stick descended, and Malambi's voice grew hoarse. The 4th time the stick cleaved empty air and struck the concrete. It split as if with an axe. Joe had slid away, pushing his bleeding body as if he were sinking his heels in the hard concrete. Malambi breathed deep with her exertions. Her great breasts rose and fell, and she trembled, and perspiration ran down her face. She looked around at the other boys. "All you ain't shame is by dead dog all you go play?" "And what happened for that?" one of them shouted, angry because his friend had been beaten. "You can't do anything. You must go take we for Joe. Joe is too damn stupid. He big and strong, and he does still let an old woman like you beat him. If I was he, I'd tumble you all over the place." They spoke about it for weeks after, and Malambi was afraid to show her face in public. She locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. How Joe, as if the devil had gotten into him, got slowly to his feet, gasping and bending his arms to and fro as if measuring his strength. How his eyes had turned red, and how he had taken up the piece of bamboo and advanced slowly on Malambi, who was so shocked she couldn't say a word. For weeks afterward, in the barrack yard, in George Street, and near the market, in the shops, and on the pavements, it was a delicious scandal, a big bacchanal. "But neighbor, you hear how Malambi grandson will beat she up?" "Yes, man, down in the dry river the tables turn. I hear he beat she, and everybody say how it good for she, and nobody won't stop Joe." He follow she home, pelting wild cuff in she back and in she head. It was the sweetest fight for a long time. I hear now she too afraid for him. Two things happened. Joe suddenly became a man, capable of loving and hating deeply. He decided to leave the school he attended in Nelson Street, parallel to George Street, and find a job. And Malambi became a cringing, frightened old woman. Sometimes in the kitchen she talked to herself, cursing and abusing the world for taking advantage of a woman in her old age, waving her hands as if she were mad. But whenever Joe was around, she kept quiet, looking at him out of the corners of her eyes. When he came home from gambling or idling about the city, she had an enamel cup of tea hot on the table and a large slice of bake and fried saltfish all ready for him. Joe didn't bother with her. He just kept to himself, silent, thinking a little about the future. He never had cause to strike Malambi again. One Saturday night, he was supporting the lamp post at the corner of Queen and George Streets, listening to a wayside preacher. Clad in a white flowing gown, a string of black beads hanging round his neck, and a Bible in his hand, the bearded preacher walked up and down the pavement, sometimes shaking the book, sometimes lifting his eyes to the stars and spreading out his hands, beseeching mercy for the sinning people. A sickly bottle flambeau lighted the scene. 3 women, dressed in gaudy silk robes, accompanied the preacher. They stood up near the wall and sang, "Onward, Christian Soldiers," and "Abide with Me." The light from the flambeau cast their shadows high on the wall. A sheet of newspaper was spread on the pavement, and occasionally a penny or a cent was dropped on it. It was an unwritten law that any barrack folk giving more than a penny would be ostracized for showing off on the others. If Malambi was ill, she still came to the meetings to sing and pray, her neck wrapped in cotton flannel. Nothing in the world could stop her. All her sins were washed away on Saturday night. When she prayed, she didn't pray for anything. She prayed for everything. She mumbled prayers for the whole sinning world. She shut her eyes tight and moved her lips, and the clean waters washed her soul. But she never remembered her prayers. Joe watched and listened at the meeting. He saw his grandmother lapping up the words of the preacher like she was hungry, rolling her eyes and her tongue, wetting her lips, and she sang all the hymns. She opened her mouth wide and sang the loudest. She sang with such fervor that the neighbors whispered among themselves sympathetically, "The Spirit of the Lord possessed she for sure." The preacher bellowed, "There will be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth." The singers said, "Yes, yes." And Malambi screamed, "Oh God, listen to the word, ye sinners! Wash your sins away!" Joe wasn't paying any particular attention because Malambi used to drag him along every Saturday night, and he knew the whole proceedings by heart. He turned to a man at his side and said, "John, I want a job, man." John, a notorious gambler, laughed loudly. "But hear ye, it have so much work done in the Yankee bases, men reaping harvest for so, and you say you want work? They paying good money down at Chaguaramas, man. Why you don't go?" Joe went the next Monday. He got a job easily, but it was a lot of hard work, preparing the swampy land for the buildings the Americans were putting up. Trucks used to take the men to work from the city, and he had to get up early to be on time. When he began to work, Malambi took washing his clothes and keeping the tea hot by a coal pot. But Joe never used to tell her anything at all. The first day he got paid, she made a special supper of black pudding and sauce, and she bought a bottle of rum from her own money and put it on the table and waited for him. But Joe didn't come home until it was after midnight, and he was drunk. She asked him for some money, and he told her flatly to go to hell. that as soon as he had enough saved, he was going to clear out and she would never see him again. Joe gave his money to Rita to keep for him. Rita lived next door, and when Malambi got to find out, she abused the girl so much that finally she had to move and go to live with an aunt in Nelson Street. Joe never courted Rita or anything like that. It was just sort of decided between them that when they had enough money, Rita worked as a housemaid with a rich white family in St. Clair, a beautiful residential district. So they would just go away and live together. When they talked about it, they quarreled because Rita wanted to go in the country and live, and Joe didn't want to leave the Dry River area. He was a member of the best steel band in that part of the city, and that was enough reason. He couldn't leave the boys. But Rita insisted, and as time went by, Joe speculated on what an entirely different life it would be like to live in a clean house and eat good food. He didn't have many friends. He had grown up silent, learning from what he saw, heard, and felt. The most noise Joe made was when he was playing the tenor kettle in the steel band. When Malambi realized Joe was serious, she began to get sudden attacks and pains all over her body, wailing about old age and moaning in the night how she had worked herself to the bone to send Joe to school and bring him up, and now he was going to desert her. "Oh God, oh what I go do? I don't even know if your poor mother alive. It's 2 years since I see she last." But Joe ignored her, and once more her attitude became aggressive and bullying. Fancying herself safe because Joe refused to talk or have anything to do with her, she struck him as much as she could with her tongue. "You little black bitch, that is all the gratitude you have. You think you is big shot because you're working for plenty Yankee money. But that same woman Rita go do for you. Go on giving she all your money. You go find out one day when the mark bust. She go left you and go whoring all over the place. Every gal who born on George Street does turn whore." If Joe made a sudden movement, she would run behind the door and, drawing it against her body, continue her abuse from there. But no matter what she told Joe, she couldn't draw a word from him, because he knew he would never forget all the hate and blows and hunger he had lived through. When she stopped washing his clothes, he took his laundry to Rita. When she refused to leave food for him or prepare any for him to take to work, he bought sandwiches in a Chinaman's parlor in Queen Street. Sometimes he went round by Rita in the night and said, "Girl, I'm hungry." And Rita made black soup with dumplings and vegetables to show him at the same time she could cook his favorite food as good or better than Malambi. "Joe," she said one night as they strolled around the Queen's Park Savannah, "I hear plenty houses for rent up Barati area." "Is which part that is?" Joe asked. "Well, I never hear that." "You mean a born Trinidadian like you don't know which part Barati area is?" "Boy, it's just about 4 miles from here on the eastern main road. It near to Caledonia, man. Where Buttards live in. Plenty taxis and bus, so you could come to work on time." "That good," he said non-committally. "But I'm telling you, Rita." "But I'm telling you," Rita urged, "we could live there. We have about $100 saved up. We could coast on that." "Joe, I'm getting tired of waiting, man." They sat down on a bench and Joe said, "Well, if you're tired, you know what to do. You see how you always picking quarrel? It's not so I mean, but the sooner the better. You don't think?" Joe nodded. He was thinking about all the fetes in Port of Spain he would miss. But anyway, he could always spend a night or so with the boys. He didn't have to stick to Rita's tale just because they were going to live together. Buttards was always in town even though he was living in Caledonia. The next week, they got a house to rent in Barataria, paying an agent $50 reward. They moved up without telling a soul. Ma Lambe broadcast the news in the neighborhood, calling down curses on the youth of today, and it was the subject of conversation for a week before people began to forget. Tiger's neighbors were the Martins. They lived in a yellow and brown house built of concrete bricks with glass windows. They had running water and a septic tank. They used an electric stove in the kitchen. Joe Martin couldn't appreciate the amenities his money and home offered. He threw cigarette butts on the floor, wore his clothes dirty, and cursed when Rita rebuked him. "It's so we black people can't get on," she would storm. "You're keeping the house dirty like a pig. You won't even go in the yard and clean it when you're doing nothing on a Sunday morning. You're drinking your rum and you're cursing so much that even the child start to cuss now. The other day I sending him to Tallboy's shop for a tin of milk. He tell me go for the damn thing myself. It's only when I bleed some licks in him that he went." The child was Rita's sister's boy Henry. Rita was keeping him because her sister had gone to Venezuela with a man. Joe had objected strongly, but when he heard that the boy's mother would send money to keep him, he shrugged and said he would have nothing to do with it. Henry began to call Joe and Rita Pa and Ma from the first day. They were growing to love him because Rita couldn't have any children of her own. Henry listened wide-eyed when they quarreled. The clash of the words, the gesticulations, got him excited. One night, Joe hurled a bottle at Rita, and Henry went running across the track by the hibiscus fence. "Mr. Tiger! Mr. Tiger!" he screamed. "Hide me! Ma and Pa fighting!" During the day, Rita would stand by the fence and gossip to Miller as she swept the mango leaves from the yard. "I never see a man so in my barn days," she said. "A fussy bad. He like to drink rum too bad. Why we Creole can't live like Indian, quiet and nice?" Miller was embarrassed. She knew from experience that Indians fought and quarreled just as much. Didn't she have a mark on her shoulder where an empty tin had struck her when her own father and mother were fighting? It was the same thing all over. Only white people. If they could only be like white people. When the mango season was coming in, the tree in Tiger's yard had begun to flower. Miller went to Rita one morning. She was washing clothes in a tub. She bent backwards and forwards like a piece of machinery, scrubbing the dirt out of Joe's clothes and grumbling to herself. Her black face glistened. Perspiration ran in little streams down the back of her neck. Miller whispered in her ear. Rita passed a sunny hand across her forehead and straightened the flowered cloth on her head. "Well, you don't know what this is. You in baby girl." "What that mean, ma?" Henry asked. "Get your little tail from here and get dressed for school." Rita snapped and slapped Henry on his buttocks with her soapy hand. Suds flew and Henry ran inside. "Yes, girl." Her voice softened as she turned back to her neighbor. "He is going to have a baby." And she related about the time when her sister was having Henry, how she didn't have to go to any doctor. "Not even a midwife was there," she said. "It's me who delivered the baby for she. It was easy for she, but I don't know about you." And she appraised Miller's frail frame. "You better eat plenty food and get strong," she advised. Tiger came in from the garden when the sun sank. He had carried the cow with him because there was good grazing grass near his land, and he could keep an eye on the animal. Now it preceded him, trailing a rope, stopping to crunch at a crop of grass on the roadside. He had gone into Tallboy's shop for a shot of rum. He did that every evening now, when he was going back home. He never drank too much, just enough to make him feel big. He tied the cow under the mango tree. "Hoi, Miller," he called. The girl came out. "Tiger," she said excitedly. "Something happened." "What?" he asked, trying to show a calmness he didn't feel. I going to have a baby. It's true. Who tell you? How you know? It's a boy child. A new path opened in the jungle of his mind. He thought, things happen so quickly. Oh, I will know if it's boy child. It's Rita who tell me. She know all about these things. The rum was warm in his belly. He did not know what was the right thing to say, but he was happy. He laughed. Well, girl, I hope it's boy child. You glad, Tiger? You glad? She asked eagerly and waited for his answer before breathing. I have to think about these things, he said wearily. But it's a good thing what happened. When they went inside, he said, I open an account with Tallboy this evening, so you could trust things and we will pay every week. Later, he sat on the floor, sharpening his hoe with a stone. She asked, How the garden come in? It's a lot of work, girl. That land look rich, but I have to do plenty weeding before I fork it. It look like they have a swamp down there. Plenty other people have garden. Lettuce take in good and watercress. But okra and melon Jean would take too. He got up after testing the sharpness of the hoe with his thumbnail. He went to the cupboard he had made from a soap box. It's about $100 remain, he said, counting the bill slowly. We have to careful. The garden have plenty work yet before we start to plant. You better start selling milk from the cow. Tiger knew that money was necessary, that life could be hard, rotyless without it. He had seen his father and mother scrape together the remains of supper for breakfast in the morning, and how often he had gone out in the cane with nothing but a weak cup of tea in his belly. Hours and hours in the blazing sun. Out there in the sun, one forgot hunger in the swing of cutlass and fat, juicy stalks of cane. There was no time to think. It was work. Work until the back ached and the days burnt into weeks and months. But if there was any way of getting by without money, he would take it. He preferred 10 pounds of rice to a dollar bill. He couldn't eat the dollar. And if he had his way, he would trade his crops in Tallboy's shop for flour and cooking oil and perform all negotiations by an exchange of the things he possessed for the things he wanted. So he thought as he lay on the floor that night. There were so many things he did not understand, so many bees in the hive of his brain. He figured this was so because he had very little to offer in exchange, and he thought that when he planted his crops and reaped his harvest of okra, melangine, and bodi, he would have plenty to offer in exchange for all the things he wanted to discover and uncover. He didn't know whom he would make this bargain with, but didn't he find out where the estate office was when he wanted to rent the land? Then he thought of the baby in Ermila's belly. He put out his hand fearfully and touched her where it was. Ermila stirred. He drew back his hand. For a long time he watched with wonder, and then a serious thought came. He began to pray fervently in the night. "O God, let it be a boy child." When he milked the cow in the morning, Ermila said mischievously, "Let we put water in it. It go get more." "It have no reason for that," Tiger reproved. "My father said not to do anybody anything you unless they do to you. We new in this place. Let we live good with everybody." "I was only making a joke," Ermila said. "And two besides, plenty trouble in that. One time Sook then did put water in he milk, and the police get to find out. He get charged $50 in court. We self used to buy from him. Me say, oh, he's a thief, and since that time, she stopped trying to cow in with land to graze." She was fanning away smoke from the fire. Tiger said, "You know what? You better cook some food for me to carry in the garden. From now, I go work whole day. Everything go finish quicker." "All right, I go with you and sell the milk." She had never sold anything before, but she wasn't embarrassed to walk around the streets with the pail on her head, shouting, "Aye, milk! Fresh cow milk!" One woman told her, "All you Indian too worthless. All you do is sell water flavour with milk." "Oh no, madam," Ermila said quickly. "Just this morning I make a joke and tell my husband to put water, and he get so vexed. That young man I does see passing with the cow and the hoe, he is your husband?" "Yes. But how all you Indian people does married so young? He still look like little boy. And poor you. You still have your mother features." Womanhood squeezed out of the earth of her miller. "I only look small," she said proudly, tossing her long hair on her shoulders as she threw her head back. "But I going to have baby do." The woman looked shocked. Bien," she exclaimed, and shook her head sadly. "All right, my child, I go take milk. You could bring a pint every day. You know the scheduled price is 8 cents. She was lucky. At the 11th house, she saw the last pint and went home in triumph. Rita asked, "Where you been to, girl?" "Girl, I selling milk now. I make regular customers already." "But, it's so you does the thing. You don't know that I would buy from you myself. You must leave a buckle from every man in man." And they went on to talk of Joe and Tiger. Always Rita complained of Joe. "Don't let your husband get like that, child," she warned the Indian girl, "because life go be hell." End of chapter 2.